This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.
Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us Dr. Craig McMahan, who is the university pastor and minister at Mercer University. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Great. It's great to have you here tonight, Greg.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And you know, we were discussing the New Testament and your knowledge of that, and I tried to express my deep erudition on that. I didn't do very well, but that's good. It's good.
You got a B plus. You got a B plus.
Oh, that's good. That's good. I just do a little better. Well, actually, one of the great things that I've observed in my travels through life is the enormous sort of events that have taken place recently at Mercer. The atavistic, kind of not atavistic, altruistic kind of events that have taken place in Vietnam in regards to the tragic story of amputees. And I'll just throw you the softball. Why don't you tell me what you've been up to and what Mercer's been up to?
Great. Well, I direct a program called Mercer on Mission, began in 2007. It's an international service learning program where we send students abroad working on high-impact service projects. We don't want to spend time and money flying around the world painting walls and hugging babies. We want to do things that it takes a university expertise to be able to pull off. And so one of those programs that began in 2009 is our prosthetic legs program that we've been doing in Vietnam. We send a team of students over along with faculty members, and we put prosthetic legs on amputees. The prosthetic leg that we have is developed by Dr. Ha Van Vo, who is one of our really bright young faculty members in the School of Engineering. He's a biomechanical engineer, and he designed this prosthetic leg that we can make for a fraction of what market cost would be on them. We make our prosthetic leg for about $200, and if you were to buy a comparable leg from a prosthetic company anywhere in the U.S., it'd be $6,000 to $8,000. And so that's for below the knee, above the knee, about $250, and that would cost between $15,000 and $20,000. And so we are currently at 6,000 amputees that we have fit since 2009.
Well, that's a great story. Now, how did it happen? How did the idea occur? I mean, we're here in Macon, Georgia, and it's a long way to Vietnam. And how did the idea hatch out?
Well, it began with President Underwood even before he was officially president here, calling me into his office in March of 2006. And he said, "So you're the university minister. What do you do?" And I had anticipated the question, came up with a list of what I thought were moderately impressive answers.
Yes.
And he looked at me and said, yeah, nice. And then he said, "I got this other thing I want you to do. I want you to get Mercer students studying abroad doing service."
Yes.
And I made the mistake of nodding and saying, "I like that idea. I'll give it my best shot." And President Underwood looked me straight in the eye, and he said, "I don't want your best shot. I want you to do this."
Oh, so, wow, that's a good story, isn't it?
So I immediately had a mandate from the president-elect to get this program launched. And I happened to be in the weight room one day meeting up with some faculty members and talking about my new assignment.
Yes.
And one of them was Dr. Vo. And he said, "Well, interestingly, I'm working on a prosthetic leg."
Yes.
And I immediately said, "You're my new best friend."
Wow.
Because I need some projects and you need someone to help you get it launched. And it was a great match. And so he and I have become very close friends over the years. And so that became the vehicle for his research in prosthetics to be able to deliver those prosthetic legs to Vietnam.
Well, this is just absolutely great. I think it's a wonderful project. It's just great to see this happen in Macon, Georgia. And all the history that exists between the United States and Vietnam. It's a very healing kind of thing to do, is it not? I mean,
it is.
There are a lot of amputee victims there. How many people are, what's the story on amputee victims?
We were meeting with the Vietnamese government up near Hanoi, actually in Hanoi, 2 years ago, and we asked those specific questions. And what they tell us is that there are 100,000 amputees in Vietnam, documented amputees, so there's probably more. 100,000 documented amputees in Vietnam currently, and a quarter of the country still holds, they estimate, over 2 million landmines that have been unexploded.
yes.
So there are still people stepping on landmines
Yes,
today.
yes.
About 2,000 a year actually step
Really?
on
Wow.
landmines and
Wow.
lose limbs. So it's a very persistent and pernicious problem that continues to exist.
And so one of the things to me that's is very interesting, you mentioned the prices, and the real sort of big picture issue is it's first world technology transference to third world country, and how that is so effectively and efficiently done. What's the situation, or what was the situation in Vietnam before your arrival on the scene? What's been happening to those 100,000?
They do have prosthetic companies there. The problem is that they are very expensive in regards to the relative income of a Vietnamese person.
Right, yes.
And so actually prosthetic care is out of the reach of many people in the country. And so there were many people who were getting prosthetic legs, no doubt about that, but there were also many more who weren't. And our target audience is those people who are not getting, who do not have enough money to buy a prosthetic leg through the government.
Which is a lot of people.
Which is a lot of people, yes.
A lot of people.
Yes.
Now, I believe you can favor us tonight with some slides and some video.
Yes,
Maybe
yes.
why don't you see what
yeah,
we
so
can
we've
come
got
up
a
with
we've
here.
got a video that shows a gentleman, typical gentleman coming into our prosthetic
See if
clinic.
it's going to happen. Brad, wake
Yep.
up.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, that's the after version. This is him after he's received a prosthetic leg.
Look how happy he looks.
He's been in our clinic about 2 hours.
Yes.
Now that's the way he ended up. The other video will show where he started out.
Okay.
I don't know if we can get that one, but it'll show you how he began. So notice he's on crutches, and that's a homemade prosthetic leg that he's working on there. Now the issue is not just a medical issue; it's an economic issue.
Yes.
In Vietnam, a great number of the people are day laborers, and so they have to work farming, work with their hands. And so if you can't use your hands other than to hold crutches, you're very limited in what you can do.
Yes.
And so that after picture that you saw of him walking and then dancing, throwing down his crutches,
Wow.
there's a person who's not only had a medical revolution in his life, but he's had an economic and social revolution in his life.
One of the things that happens in this kind of injury is the whole family unit is really nipped.
Absolutely.
Is that right? There's a lot of I guess, distress in the family unit. People have to stay home, and particularly with males, they're the breadwinners. Culturally, it's quite a terrible thing.
That's right.
Not being able to provide for your family.
Yeah. In fact, that was the actual purpose of landmines.
Yes.
If you kill a soldier, you take out one person.
Yes.
If you maim a soldier, then you take out that person and the person who has to take care of him.
Yes.
And so in war, landmines, horrifically, were actually more efficient than killing.
Yes. Well, all right, so the project is out there, and I've tried to, at least in my mind, understand why things are so expensive in the United States, and it's possible to produce something at such a low cost there. Do you have comments on that?
Sure.
I mean, what are some reasons it's so inexpensive to do that?
Yeah, the reason that we're at about 1% of market on this particular prosthetic, there's several factors. One is the process that we use is much less time intensive.
Yes.
And so if you were to get a prosthetic leg in the U.S., there would be multiple visits to the prosthetist for fitting, for measuring, for adjustment, and this could stretch maybe over a period of 6 to 8 weeks before you actually got a prosthetic leg fit. The gentleman that you saw in the video there was in our clinic 2 hours.
Yes.
And so we're able to do the fitting very rapidly, so there's not a lot of time expense involved. Secondly, the material that we're using. If you were to go to a standard prosthetic company here in the U.S., you would get a very nice carbon fiber prosthetic leg. It's heavier, and it's custom molded to the person's leg. We use polypropylene plastic, so many times cheaper. And so that accounts for a lot of the change in difference between a prosthetic leg that you would buy here and what we do. We have no profit margin.
Yes.
We make no money on these. In fact, it costs us money. And we have a very generous donor in the community who has made it possible for us to fit, again, 6,000 amputees with these prosthetic legs. So we have no profit margin, the materials are cheaper, the process is cheaper, and we do a good job.
Well, obviously. Well, now, looking at that, so do you have some statistics? I mean, so presumably, let's say something has happened in the U.S., so there's a lot of, is everything perfect? Is this going to, every little nuance of perfection is employed? And there must be some kind of marker to see how well these systems compare with one another. And the extra 10,000, whatever the story is, the extra $10,000 that goes into the U.S. prosthesis. How do the two systems compare with one another?
So let me give you two answers to that. In December of last year, so this would be December 15, the Vietnamese government required that we had an assessment to be done about the effectiveness of the prosthetic leg. The Vietnamese government's very cautious in who they let in, obviously, to do medical work. And they want to make sure that if you're going to be treating their people, that you're doing a good job. So they put together a government team that surveyed 170 some people who had our prosthetic leg for 3 years or longer. Of those 70 plus people that they surveyed, and they did this randomly, just went out to their place of business or to their place of residence and just found them and asked them questions. Of those 170 plus, 82% wore the prosthetic every day for more than 8 hours. That's a very significant percentage. Of the 18% that weren't wearing it that long, 14% weren't wearing it because of vascular problems. They had diabetes, and so their physician said, you can't wear a prosthetic leg. So it had nothing to do with the efficacy of the prosthetic. So our failure rate, where we had a rivet that popped or something broke, was 4%. Local prosthetic companies have told us in Vietnam, these are local Vietnamese prosthetic companies, that their failure rate's about 42%.
Wow.
So we've had a really robust track record of durability and efficiency with the prosthetic as assessed by this most recent endeavor. The other thing is that when we put this prosthetic leg on in terms of quality, one of the distinctions about this prosthetic is that it is really light. The material that the prosthetics are made out of in Vietnam is very heavy. It's a dense plastic, very heavy. In fact, we have a slide, I'm not sure if Brad can pull it up, of a young boy.
The famous Brad.
Who's wearing one of our prosthetic legs. And this prosthetic leg, this little boy, 8 years old or so, probably weighs about 50 pounds maybe. There he is. And that prosthetic leg that he was wearing was about 10 pounds. And so our prosthetic legs are significantly lighter. In fact, when amputees who have an older style prosthetic like that one begin to wear it, have worn it for years, then they put our prosthetic leg on, they have to almost relearn to walk again because it's so light. And they always comment, your prosthetic is so comfortable and so light. He's got another slide in there, I'll give him a minute to find it, of a woman who we fit this last year who was a quadriplegic. She had had some sort of disease, you would know it better than I, that reduced blood flow. Reduced blood flow to her extremities, and so she lost both of her legs below the knee and both of her arms just above the wrist. And so she had tried to wear other prosthetic legs, but their design was such that the end of her leg actually pressed against the bottom of the prosthetic socket, and it was painful, and she couldn't wear it. And so she tried these prosthetics on, which are fit in a completely different style, a different manner, with the pressure being put on the patella tendon, where there are no nerve endings. And she was able to wear our prosthetics. So not only are they cheaper, not only are they lighter, but almost everybody that wears them finds them much more comfortable.
Well, now that seems a rather profound events occurred here. So we have 8 billion people on the earth, and there are hundreds of thousands of people around the world that live in third world countries that would benefit from this kind of technology. How hard is it to go global, if I could ask that question?
Well, yeah, no, that's a great question. There's several issues involved. One, of course, is just the expense of producing more, because we've done 6,000 in Vietnam. We still have 94,000 to go in Vietnam.
Right, yes.
So expense is an issue, and this is where I do want to say a word about our donor, Chris Sheridan, who's a local contractor
Yes,
here.
I'm glad you mentioned his
Yeah.
name. So he needs
Yeah,
kudos to Chris. Yes.
Yeah, Chris Sheridan and his family have committed $1.25 million out of their family foundation to go to purchase the materials to make these prosthetic legs and to help cover our expenses.
Yes, yes.
And then out of his own pocket, he's paid, I don't know, several $100,000 additional
Yes.
to make this possible. So, you know, one of the real critical issues that we have is that the only thing that's slowing us down from going global is that we just need people who are willing to say, I want to buy a leg. Here's $200 for me. I'll buy a leg.
Yes, yes.
And so that's an issue. The other issues that are not insurmountable at all, but require attention, are dealing with the local governments and the national governments. You know, demonstrating our credibility and demonstrating our reputation, and that we're willing to come in and work with their people. So just lining up the logistics of working with the medical community, making sure that everything is acceptable to them and that the governments are okay. Other than that, it's not really that hard.
Well, did you initially meet with some suspicion? How hard was it to sort of get in the ground in Vietnam?
Sure. This is where Dr. Vo was, again, incredibly significant to this effort, because being South Vietnamese, he already had connections in Vietnam, and he'd actually, prior to this project, been working in Vietnam every summer, going over volunteering in hospitals to do surgeries.
Yes.
He has an MD as well as a PhD in
Yes.
biomedical engineering. And so he would go back, and so he had earned some credibility in the hospital with local doctors and what they call the Association for the Poor, which is roughly equivalent to our county health departments.
Yes.
And so because of his reputation with them, when he approached them about this project, they were willing to say, all right, we'll let you get started. And so we started slowly. Our first year, we did just 38 prosthetics in 3 weeks.
Yes.
This last summer, in 3 weeks,
Yes.
we did 523 amputees.
Yes. Wow. Now I notice you have some young people attired in blue,
Right.
And those are Mercer students.
These are Mercer biomedical engineers who have gone through 2 courses of training
Yes.
that prepare them to fit the prosthetic leg. And then those of us who have already been licensed, I'm a licensed prosthetist in Vietnam.
Good. Besides
How about that?
your theological background, that's
right.
a good thing. Yes.
Yeah. So we work with the students, and they kind of apprentice with us for the first several days.
Yes.
And then we're all together in a large room. When we finish with every amputee, they are required to walk for us. The gentleman you saw in the video was demonstrating, you know, his gait and making sure that's. And then Dr. Vo signs off on every amputee that we fit. And so he comes up and analyzes the gait, comfort, all the issues that would be attendant to a good fit. He assesses that, and then he's the one that signs off on our consent forms to say that this is well done.
You know, there are lots of charitable organizations out there, and there's the largesse of the U.S. government. I mean, and have you approached other foundations or the U.S. government, or how to?
We're in the process of really ramping that portion of our work up. We have approached some. I'm not going to name some of the U.S. Agencies that we have tried to approach who won't even answer our emails. That really is the big next step. Is we've got the fitting down, we've got the material and the product down. We really are at a place of saying we need to bring this to scale. President Jimmy Carter is a trustee at Mercer.
That's great. Yes,
and he's very interested in this project. And one of the concerns that he registers is how do we bring this to scale? We can go fit 500. We're now going to, in 3 weeks, we're going to be at a pace of about 3,200 to 3,500 a year.
Yes.
Well, it'll take us a long time to reach the other 94,000 amputees in Vietnam at that level. And so the question is, how do we ramp that up? And the bottleneck is not in production. It's not really even in fitting. It is in money to buy the prosthetic legs.
Really? Yes.
And the reason I say that it's not in the fitting is because one of our protocols is that we are now training local Vietnamese physicians and technicians in how to fit the prosthetic. And so when we bring our Mercer on Mission team back to the U.S., there are still teams of Vietnamese trained prosthetic technicians and physicians who are now putting on our prosthetic leg over there. So we think that's a good model.
Good. You know, I was thinking, is there some kind of like world statistics on amputee victims, landmine victims? I mean, I was thinking about Sierra Leone or Liberia.
Right.
I mean, there must be places that have been Iraq, right.
Yes.
Well, I mean, what about that? I mean, there are places that have huge numbers of, for many reasons, particularly where there's been a war, and lots of people there in a state of distress. How hard would it be? Well, you mentioned Iraq. How hard is it to do something in Iraq? Is there money in the till? The government exports a lot of oil. They're a fairly wealthy place. Comments? I mean,
well, that's where again, you're on the cutting edge of where our expansion is now. Initially, our concerns were: do we have a good product? Do we have a good fitting protocol? Do we have the process right?
Yes.
We've now come to the place where we have that process right. In fact, Brad's got one more picture that he might throw up here. The Prime Minister of Vietnam, Nguyen Phuc, invited us in for a formal ceremony of recognition, where he thanked us for the work that thanked us for the work that we were doing. And I asked him, I said, what can we do to improve our product? What can we do to improve our service to the people? And he stopped me and he said, there is nothing you could do to improve. He said, you are the best NGO, non-governmental organization. You're the best NGO operating in Vietnam.
Wow, that's quite a compliment. Yes.
The only thing you can do to improve is to expand. And so that's really what we're trying to do. And expanding in Vietnam is important, but as you push, with your question, there's so many areas to expand into. And again, it comes back to we're looking for the funding to be able to expand our work.
Well, how hard is it, just to ask this question, is there I use a capitalist word, a market niche? I don't know if you've heard that one, Pastor, but there's like, I don't know, I'll just use Iraq, so fairly wealthy, at least some money around. And if maybe the government says, I can pay $1,000 or there's that amount of money, but there's just no way to go under that, but we could contribute $500. And then it would make everything work. I mean, is some way that deal could happen?
Again, that's the piece we're exploring now. We are really transitioning into answering the very questions that you're asking. I don't have the answer today.
Yes.
But you're right on target with the cusp of where we are. That's what we're trying to determine now: is how can we find the funding and amass the resources that it would take. And I should say at this point, there is not a single dime of money that's given to Mercer on Mission that goes for administrative costs, that goes for overhead.
Yes.
Every penny that goes to Mercer on Mission goes into the service projects that we do.
Yes.
So when we hope that we're able to approach philanthropic organizations, government agencies, and say, this is the best deal you can get. It doesn't get any better than this. We're doing it absolutely free. So you ask about a market niche. The market for free, I would think, would be pretty big.
Yes. Well, I guess what I'm getting into is that if maybe in some places there's a government minister somewhere who says, gee, let the government do this. I mean, we can't. We've got some money we've got this terrific problem. We can't afford the situation that's out there now, but we could contribute the money. And the other point is, the economy of the country would improve. Everything would be much better. And maybe you could give the minister some credit. The politicians like that. You may have noticed that.
So I heard.
So claim that claim whatever they're doing. I mean, maybe I just throwing that out.
I think you're exactly right. I think you're making the case that is very important to be made, that this project is not only, again, a medical relief project,
Yes.
but it is an essential project for a thriving economy.
Yes.
We had a farmer that came in several years ago, double amputee, bilateral
Yes,
amputee,
yes.
and he had to farm on his hands and knees.
Wow.
So he everywhere. So here's a rice farmer down in the rice paddy on his hands and knees farming. We put 2 prosthetic legs on him. He now stands up to farm. Much more efficient, much more effective. So governments should be able to connect the dots that spending $200 on a prosthetic leg
Yes.
is going to improve the productivity of their citizens monumentally more than that $200.
Yes. Now, I can just recollect, just in casual knowledge about the terrible things that civil wars in West Africa, just awful stories, young people that have been brutally exploited, blown up, just terrible situation there. I mean, is that, we mentioned Iraq, well, maybe there's some money around possibly, but what about some
Well, you mentioned Sierra Leone earlier,
Yes,
and we'd
yes.
actually had some conversation with an organization called Mercy Ship that goes on the west coast of Africa.
Yes.
And Mercy Ship was, again, an opportunity that we were exploring. It hasn't come to fruition yet, but they would be dealing with places like Sierra Leone, where, again, there, as you indicated,
Yes.
are many amputees from the brutality of
Yes.
war.
Yes. Now, is this out there, just to ask the question, you know, in many places there, you may have encountered rapacious people in the world. I mean, they're certainly out there. Is that an understatement?
Sure.
But, or would people say, wow, I'm going to pirate this. This leg looks great. I'm just going to pirate it and I'll sell it for $2,000. Anything like that
That's
happen?
right. Not yet. We have patented the leg. We're in the process of patenting the prosthetic leg. We have a U.S. patent on it, but again, as you would know, that U.S. patent only pertains to what we would find in the U.S. And so the probability of someone finding it and knocking it off is a possibility. In fact, we've even talked about coding, physically coding our prosthetic legs in some remote area on the prosthetic,
yes.
so that if someone comes back and said, this thing is terrible, we can look and make sure we can say, that's not our leg, somebody knocked it off. And so we're actually trying to prevent that kind of liability in terms of our reputation. But there's really not much we can do if finding and prosecuting would be much more a problem than that probably would be.
All right.
worth.
Now, just to ask that, I don't want to be too whatever. But just to continue on this, thinking of ways to make this work worldwide. Suppose you picked a moderately wealthy country. I mean, I'll say Spain. Pick that out.
Okay.
Okay, and everything goes for $5,000 there. You just have sort of a company that's there that drops the price. But there's some profit that's generated there, and then you take the profit and then take it to places that can't afford that.
That is a model that we have talked about. That is a model that we've talked about. And of course, as you would know, one of the barriers that we have even for doing this for indigent people in the U.S. is the FDA. This is a medical device, and getting a medical device through the testing and all of the procedures that would allow us to fit it and even charge a modest amount, a couple $100 here, would be many years and many hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so it's cost prohibitive and time prohibitive for us to do that in a place like the U.S. If we could do it in a place like Spain,
Yes.
then that would certainly be an opportunity that we'd want to explore. Right now, we've not seen any openings for that, but that is something that we are aware of and that we have considered.
Wow, what a great thing you've done. Well, we're concluding we're near the end of our time here. Boy, that's just great. I mean, I encourage you to keep at this. I'm just so pleased to talk to you tonight and just get a chance to just let some of the great work you're doing, let the public see a bit of it. I hope you will continue to do such great things. And how do you see the future? Last question there for your product.
Well, we are committed to fitting every amputee in Vietnam. And we're looking then at moving to Laos, to Cambodia. And so while we continue to do our work, we're also pressing on those edges that you've talked about in terms of infrastructure to be able to find the support that we need to be able to do that.
Yes, and that the FDA needs to be more reasonable. On that note, thank you so much, Minister. Thank you for being here. Enjoyed talking to you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.